Listen, thank you very much for coming. It's always a bit difficult when you find in this place to gather more people between 1 and 2. We tried it. We thought that piano recitals, lunchtime concert should also attract the same number of people, but we don't. But thank you for coming, because I know that you're giving up your lunch. I hope you're on staff. Starting next year, we're going to have all these talks between 6:30 or 6 o'clock to make it more accessible to the public. We find that we have twice as many people, at least, when we put it on at 6 or 6:30. But I'm extremely delighted that Amanda has agreed to come, giving up her lunch today. And Amanda is going to tell us something about the British Film Institute and what it has done and where it's going, and in particular with reference to Chinese filmmaking in China, which of course impinge on our lives more and more, and that's why we have the centre. And I hope that if this is your first time here, you'll come back, because we've got lots of other programmes you can see from the leaflet. And tonight we've got, for example, Tracy Emin coming, and that will be very good. And next year we've got a lot more attraction. And some of the film stars with whom Amanda deal, both physically and cellularly.
About physically.
All right, well, will you first join me in welcoming Amanda Nevill?
Hello, it's lovely to, it's really lovely to be here. And I was asked to talk about the BFI, but particularly our growing bond with China. So I thought I'd start with a bit of interactivity. And so those of you, I want to see who lives closest to Gerrard Street in Chinatown. So does anybody live very close to Gerrard Street in Chinatown? I do, so I win on this one. So if we were trying to make I actually live literally at the end of the street, and it's
Carol Thatcher as well.
Oh,
She shares a flat literally at the end of the street. Are you in the same block?
Yeah, I'm just on this red.
Yeah, she's there.
If I stand at the end of Gerrard Street and look up, I can see my French windows on my flat.
Well, we could have had you at 6:30 by remote control. You're shouting from the other flat.
I should invite you all back for lunch, really, shouldn't I? Anyway, as you can see, I am very committed to our relationship with China to such an extent. I live right in the middle of Chinatown, so that's got to be a good start, and I beat all of you on that. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the BFI, just so that you get a sense of it. And the BFI is vast, I can only sort of skim the surface. I'm going to leave lots of time for you to ask me questions at the end. I'm going to talk very quickly about why I think film is so exciting and important today. I'm going to talk about all the work we've been doing in China. I'm going to show you a couple of clips, quite short clips, and then hopefully, if I haven't sent you to sleep, David is then going to wake us all up with some questions, and I will answer anything, I always say, that's legal and moral. So the BFI has been around for a very long time. It was founded way back in 1933, fantastically really, at a time when film across the world was starting to make a lot of money in America, but was still seen as a bit of a cheap entertainment, and for the lower classes, what's more. And I think it was fantastic with the founders of the BFI. They recognised that it was a really great art form in the making, and they obviously understood that one day film was going to carry a weight in terms of communication and the ability to speak across cultural and physical borders that possibly no other art form had ever done. We're Royal Chartered. We're one of only 1,000 organisations in the UK that's got a Royal Charter. And we have chartered objectives, but really the top one's the most important, and it says that we are there to promote the art of film, television and the moving image. So always remember that's what we're there for. We're looking after the artists and looking after this art form, hopefully to create things that will enchant you and let you see different worlds. When I joined the BFI, which is actually 13 years ago, but please don't tell anybody, because usually in public institutions after 10 they want to kick you out. But I was brought in by Anthony Minghella, who actually had a Chinese wife, and so it's a shame in a way that he's not still around to be our chair. But he used to say that when you watch a film, you borrow somebody else's eyes for 2 hours. And I think that's such a fantastic way of instantly understanding that the power that film has. It's a fantastic way to understand other people and other cultures. We're a charity, but we're also the lead body for film in the UK. So we are a lottery distributor, so we have a huge privilege of distributing the lottery funds for film. We'll talk a bit more about that. We're a big cultural body. Our turnover is about 100 million a year, of which 55 million is lottery funds. An ever-decreasing amount is central funding.
£100 million a year?
Yeah. Right,
what salary are you on?
Well, it's all in the public thing. So I'll tell you about my salary afterwards if you insist. But 50 million of that is the lottery funds that come to us to distribute, so that's part of our job. An ever-decreasing amount comes from central government, so we get about 17 million from central government, but a lot of that's ring-fenced to pass on, so 4 million immediately goes out like a postbox to Northern Ireland, because it's something to do with the peacekeeping Good Friday agreement. I know it's interesting, realm. And the remainder of the money does everything from negotiate co-production treaties, fund all the film archives around the country, fund all the independent cinemas around the country, look after the National Archive, run the BFI London Film Festival and everything we do, which obviously you couldn't achieve with 13 million, which is why a really important part of our activity is to generate funds, and we generate a further 25 million a year from our activities. And the interesting thing is, because we're a charity, our role, I always say, is to generate money from the things that the industry has decided aren't commercially viable. But we still manage it, driven by passion and energy. I think the really exciting thing for the BFI is that film is more pertinent today than ever before. And with the advent of digital, it has meant that film is moving in, and the strength of film has moved up to levels of delivery and accessibility, both in terms of everybody being able to have a go, but also as consumers, those of us that really love film in day-to-day life, we expect to, and indeed we can see film across so many platforms whenever we choose. And I often think, when I look back to the founders of the BFI, what foresight they had and how extraordinary and what a privilege it is to run the BFI as an organisation now, because it's looking after an art form which is fast evolving and really looking into the future. What do we do as an organisation? It's very simple. We have 3 strategic priorities. The first strategic priority is education and audiences. Our second strategic priority is looking after filmmaking and filmmakers. And our third strategic priority is looking after the nation's archive, the BFI National Archive. So just turning to each of those. So our first one, education and audiences. Education, I know I don't need to tell you this because that's why you're here today, you understand it in your DNA. But there is a lot of research which shows that if you catch a child when they're young and start to show them a really broad choice of film, that you will pique their curiosity, and they are 3 times more likely to be avid cinema and film consumers into the future. And we are very concerned to ensure, and that's the whole reason that we're a cultural charity, we are trying to look after future audiences that will be much more curious in their enjoyment of film. So if we were to look at our film market, which is very, very buoyant in the UK, the one thing that we really want to try and move the dial on is that British film, only 14% of box office turnover is for independent British film. And obviously we're very keen to try and move that a bit further. And one of the ways to do that is obviously to work with young people to pique their curiosity and to start to get them to think about the sorts of films that perhaps might not have been marketed to them as forcibly as American films. We also want them to enjoy films which reflect their lives, not just the lives that are given to us perhaps by stronger economies over in the States. So education is really important. We invest in an organisation called Interfilm, And their job is very simply to get film clubs in as many schools as possible. So they already have active film clubs in 7,000 schools across the country. So in 7,000 schools across the country, once a week, on average 35 children sit down with a teacher after school and they just watch a film. And they will be encouraged to watch films which are probably outside what they would have normally watched, and then to have a chat about it afterwards. It's as simple as that. It's about seeding that love of film and understanding the breadth of it. So if we're looking after growing that, the young age, the next thing is how do we make certain that if we're getting everybody really excited about seeing a great diversity of film, how do we make certain that they've got access to it when they get older? And again, if you look particularly outside London, it's actually, and I know this because I'm actually a Yorkshire girl, I come from Yorkshire, I know what it's like trying to get at a broad diversity of film outside London. We're very privileged in London. And so a huge amount of our work is to find ways that particularly the independent cinemas are commercially able to show a broader diversity of film, not just Spectre or The Hunger Games. We love, don't get me wrong, BFI, we love Spectre, we love The Hunger Games, I'm going to Star Wars on Wednesday. I love all these big films, but there's a huge breadth of film out there, which we want people to really, really enjoy. And really included in that, we want more people to enjoy the sorts of films that are being made by young, emerging British filmmakers as well. So we're growing them very young, and then we're trying to take them through to the independent cinemas, and we're funding and working with the independent cinemas, sometimes in cities, but often just tiny film clubs around the country and community things to sort of spread that love of film as a great culture. That's what we do in venues. We're also the biggest distributor of cultural cinema in the country. And so our job is to make sure that films are available. So we have a saying that no venue is too small or too remote. So for example, one of the venues that we constantly distribute films to is a film society on the island of Unst. For those of you that might be geographically challenged, Unst is the northernmost tip of Scotland. And the person who runs the film society we probably doesn't have a film can, but 10 years ago it was a film can, now it's probably a DVD or a file. And he takes the projector and he gets on whatever the little plane is and flies to Unst for that film society. And for 13 years I've been saying that I'm going to turn up with that DVD and the projector, and I still haven't done it, but that's one of my bucket wishes to do that. So distribution is a really important thing that we do. The other thing that we do in terms of developing film culture is we run BFI South Bank, which is the National Cinematheque. And there you will find a programme of cultural cinema that you won't find anywhere else in the world. And a way of describing it is to say that we're really interested in world cinema. We're interested in contextualising British cinema and world cinema, because British cinema has a fantastically rich history, but you can only really understand it and enjoy it if you understand it in the context of world cinema. And what we say is that we are interested in reappraising films that might have been forgotten, discovering films that might have been overlooked, rediscovering films that might have been big, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but we might bring them back because they have particular pertinence. And obviously world classic cinema. So for example, at the moment we are doing a big blockbuster on love, and we've just re-released Dr. Zhivago. Who would have thought that that wasn't available? I'm sure some of you would have been to see it. But we also work with the cinemas around the country to encourage them to find new ways to get audiences to look at films that might have been overlooked. And one of my favourites was last year we did our big blockbuster on sci-fi. And there's a fantastic organisation called Abandon Normal Devices, and what they did was they screened 2001 on the satellite dish at Dodderall Bank. And 1,000 people turned up in November outside Manchester on 2 nights to watch 2001. So that whole sense of event cinema and getting audiences to experience is something that we really, really love. We want people to experience film, not just digitally, but also on the big screen, and congregationally, because that's a lot of where the fun is, and that's why really film was made to be seen. Today, of course, in the digital era, people expect to, and I'm with those people, we expect to be able to see film, wherever we are, at all times and on all devices. So we have have a fantastic DVD label. We release about 50 films a year, and these are films that wouldn't get into the market otherwise because the industry has decided that there isn't enough commercial value in them, but we know they've got huge cultural value, and if we're lucky, they'll just about wash their place. And 18 months ago, we launched the BFI player, and if you haven't discovered it, I would really urge you to go. It's an online player. 60% of the film on there is free. And you can also take on a subscription service, and you can see, again, it's a sort of echo of the sorts of cultural programmes that we are delivering in cinemas around the country. And the reason we set up our own player rather than just, because we also work with Netflix and Luby and all the other players, but we wanted to make certain that we had a platform that all the digitised material from our archive we could reach audiences, and of course the big commercial platforms wouldn't be able to also carry that and do that for us as well. And lastly, we run the BFI London Film Festival, which is one of the great events of the year, where some of the great new titles are introduced to audiences in the UK. But most importantly, it's the most fantastic trampoline, if you like, or a launch pad for emerging filmmakers, where they are finding audiences for new films, so new voices, if you like, and enjoy the same spotlight as some of our biggest directors. And it's a moment when I think the British film and cultural agenda really gets very, very vibrant. Our second priority is filmmaking. And again here, the first thing we do is we have a saying that talent's everywhere, but opportunity isn't. And actually the future of our film industry absolutely depends on our ability to find that talent no matter where it is, and to really find an avenue into the industry. So we have a whole range of activities that we do in order to do this. We have something called the BFI Film Academy, for example, where we scoop up children who think they want a career in the industry. We put them on a 6-week course, we then cream off the elite, we bring them down to London, and they have a really professional residential course. They work, this is with BAFTA, with Pinewood, so all those sort of golden gates that if you're a young filmmaker in North Yorkshire you would never feel you would have access to. We open those doors for them, and at the end of that we look after them. They're on the NFTS, the National Film School alumni. We then, we're with them all the way through their secondary education, and they can then apply to skill set through grants that we've made to get money so they can fund their own apprentices with film funds. Because we say, if you want to win the Olympics, you're looking for the elite sports people. If you want to have the best film industry in the world here, of course you need great fiscal environment that the government's supplying, but you also need to find those young people and to make it possible then to enter an industry, not just because of those people you know. We invest lottery monies in the development of films, and we also invest lottery monies in production. And these are the sorts of films that wouldn't be made without some level of public investment. So recent films that you might have seen, Philomena, you might have seen, Suffragette, fantastic film if you haven't seen it, most amazing film, woman director, woman producer. Brooklyn, which has already been nominated for some Golden Globes, it's won awards at the Hollywood Reporter. We've got great hopes for it. And then there are films like Lobster, for example, which is a much more independent film, co-production with a Greek director who's now living in the UK, and which was nominated for the European Film Awards. So we are there seeding that bottom thing. So I've got his name now, it's called King, my brain won't work, with the person who directed Paddington. His first film, Bunny and the Ball, we funded. Producer David Hayman spotted him, thought he'd got talent, brought him in, he directed Paddington, he's on his way now, he won't need public funding to help him go ahead. Our last priority is looking after the archive. It's not our archive, it's yours. It's the most significant archive of film and television in the world. If you were to go to Washington, to the Library of Congress, they would tell you that in Britain we have the greatest and most important archive. And ever since I've been at the BFI, we have been on a mission to share that with as many people as possible. And what we have done over the last 10 years is make sure it's safe, and the way in which we archive and preserve and restore it is world-beating. We do teaching all over the world in helping people look after their film archives. But actually the most important thing is to get it out there. And our most recent initiative was we committed to digitising 10,000 titles and making them available. And the first 2,500 titles we digitised and we launched this summer, and you can look at it, it's online, it's all free, it's called Britain on Film. And what we did is we geo-tagged each film to places across on a map of the UK. So you can go in and you can look at your town and see if there are films there. And we had 3 million films watched within the first 6 weeks. So, you know, that's fantastic. The people of Britain want to see themselves and they want to see their own history, their own living history, and be able to get their hands on it. So it's a really important role. Then we speed up a little bit now. As the lead body for film, one of the important things we have to do is we have to work internationally, because Britain is an absolute centre for production globally and internationally. There are more films being made here in Britain than there are, for example, in the States. What we were keen to do was to start looking at the territories that British films should be engaging with. We did a lot of research. What was really clear was obviously the US is really important, Brazil is really important, but right up there is China. There had been attempts for some 7 years before we came along to get a co-production treaty off the ground. And we have now got that co-production treaty signed, and I think there's a real lesson here in international relations on the way to do it. Because we had preserved and conserved the first Hitchcock films as part of the archive for the Olympics. It was one of the great big moments of the Cultural Olympics. And we've then toured these around the world. They've gone to some 34 countries around the world. And we took one of these films to China. What we did was we entered into a cultural partnership with China. We commissioned a Chinese composer, because it's obviously a silent film, and we presented the film as the opening of the Shanghai Film Museum. So you had this great Hitchcock film and a Chinese composer. So it was this fantastic moment of cultural coming together. And as a result of that, the Chinese authorities knew that in our hearts that we wanted a co-production treaty, because we saw it as much as a cultural handshake as it was an economic one. And as a result of that, the negotiations really started. I was then on the Prime Minister's trip to China, where we sort of really started to accelerate the conversations for a co-production treaty. Prince William went out, and we found in our archives some very early Chinese material, which we then gave back to the Chinese archive. And as a result of this, we got the co-production treaty signed. So it was more about the building of that cultural, and the intention was really of a cultural bonding between nations, a sort of handshake between the nations. The challenge now is we've got this fantastic co-production treaty, so we have to start getting some co-productions off the ground. And the biggest challenge there, of course, is British producers need to really start to understand what Chinese audiences want. Chinese producers really need to understand what British audiences want. So we started to put together a whole programme of bringing Chinese producers over here and getting UK producers to go over there. During the BFI London Film Festival this year, we really threw ourselves into this cultural exchange. We had Mabel Chung on the jury. We had one of her films as a key gala moment during the festival. We had a sidebar at a Chinese cinema. Last summer we did a big celebration of Chinese cinema with the Chinese archive. We did a big sidebar of Fang Shao Gang's work. So I think this whole thing of cultural exchange goes to the heart of what the BFI is about. And personally, I'm really, really excited about developing this into co-productions. I'm just going to finish with 2 trailers. They're quite short, but actually, I can yak, but actually, what the important thing is what we see on screen. So the first thing is I'm going to show you a trailer that we did, because we did this fantastic celebration of Chinese cinema. We worked with the Chinese Film Archive. We presented to the people of Britain who hadn't seen the depth and richness of the heritage of Chinese cinema. And then the second trailer you're going to see is actually the film that Prince William, that we found in the archive, that we preserved and restored, that Prince William, we presented back to the Chinese Film Archive, and it's the earliest known moving footage of the Nanking Road, and I think it's 1907. So let's look at the trailer for the cultural exchange, and then that really rare bit of early Chinese cinema. Somebody's pressing a button somewhere.
Eleanor, do you want to just switch off the lights?
It just gives you a sense of it and the number of partners, and I have to really say a huge thank you to UKTI China and the Chinese Embassy. Anyway, this is the film that was given to the Chinese archive we found.
For me to notice that everyone is wearing a hat. I mean, certainly the police with their helmets, but when I started Chinatown, I started selling hats, and people said, "Why are you selling trilbies?" Surely Chinese didn't wear trilbies. And I found an extraordinary photograph in 1921 in Shanghai where everyone was wearing a trilby. So the British influence in China is much more far-reaching than you might think. Anyway, that's very very interesting indeed. So that was the film that Prince Philip gave back to the Chinese.
Yes.
You haven't fiddled around with it.
We did. Oh no, we found it in the archive. We found masses of early footage.
Was it stolen before?
No, it wasn't.
How was it?
It was obviously shot by, I presume, Brits who were working in China at that time. There's a lot of that footage, but it was it needed and we still only scrape the surface, masses of preservation and restoration, because this is on physical material that decays fast. So every frame would have been restored and done.
I'm going to open the floor for questions in 1 minute. I'm just, before I forget, I'm curious to know, on your BFI iPlayer, can you download?
No.
Why?
I don't know.
Because I tell you the infuriating thing about any iPlayer, except for BBC, which you can download. You can't do it on ITV except you have catch up and you only do it permanent, is that when you go on a plane, when you go off Wi-Fi, you can't see it. So a modest suggestion from me is that you should look into the possibility of download, because if you're giving it away free anyway, you might as well let it be downloadable, whatever the word is, because it will make no difference anyway. And it means that more people will be able to watch it at leisure.
Completely. I think so. I think a lot of the free material you can get on other platforms as well, but a huge amount of the, by and large, the films that people think they want to watch are obviously behind some sort of paywall because we don't own the rights to all of British film heritage. And I share your frustration, by the way. I think what we need to remember is that we did this on 2 and 6 and a wing and a prayer, whereas the BBC would have spent tens of millions on the development of the iPlayer. And we've just launched a TVOD, a subscription service, still not download, but I mean I do share it with you, and I'd love to achieve that. I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I think that downloadable. Do you know what I mean? You download it when you have a very good Wi-Fi system, and then it's stored, and you can watch it at any time. Now look, let's open the floor, because that has been a fascinating introduction. I'm sure that some of you have some good questions. Who would? Yes.
2 points. I was in Ecuador twice in the 80s, and all the women were wearing trilbys there.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's extraordinary.
In Quito. And last week...
Ecuador, yes.
Ecuador, in South America. Last week I went to...
But they have but that's where the Panama is made. So they have a very strong tradition of... yeah, because Panamas are not made in Panama, they're made in Ecuador.
Right. And last week I went to Fellowship House in Hampstead Garden Suburb, and we saw Raise the Red Flag.
Oh, Red Lantern.
Red Lantern, that's right.
Good.
Raise the Red Lantern, which is
Yes.
It is an extraordinary film. Yeah. Most beautiful image of Gong Li, whom you saw, and of course it was made by Zhang Yimao, who masterminded the Olympics ceremonies, and he has made, and I would strongly recommend you to go and seek out his other early films, not the later ones. The later ones have gone over the top, I think. But Judo, and is an extraordinary film. And Raise the Red Lantern is about a man who has got 4 wives, well, 1 wife and 3 concubines.
He's a warlord.
He's a warlord, and he, every night at dusk, sends his butler to decide which of his women would sleep with him. And they were all standing outside the threshold, tense, because they all want to go and sleep with the warlord. And whoever the butler lights the lantern, raises it.
Great big red lantern.
Yeah, it is the favourite one. But it's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's one of my favourite films of all time.
Oh, really?
Yes. Raise the Red Lantern. You've seen it, yes? All right. Well, there it is. Thank you. That was a good 2 comments, but let's have a question. Yeah, go on. You first.
I understand there is a restriction in China with so many Hollywood movies at the moment. Those could be that loud as you do. There is a restriction, I understand, in China that there are only 27 Hollywood movies allowed. How will that have impact on, say, the British and the China co-production? Is everything allowed, or are there instructions from the Chinese side?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. And I was sort of watching in time as to how much detail to go into. So why are we interested in China? The most exciting thing for us is the size of the box office, which is, it's fast approaching the box office in America. I think there was something like 3 cinemas opening a day. And so it's going to be a huge and really important market. And the Americans, they've had people in there, so they've been in there for a very long time. There is absolutely, you're right, in terms of inward films coming in, there is a quota system, which I think is just over 30 films. The interesting thing with the co-production is that you're outside the quota system. So if it's a co-production, it's still regulated in terms of the release, but it's still outside that. It's not counted as one of those quota things, and that's one of the most attractive things. The interesting thing, though, I think, is not, I mean, just to build on your question, is that I think that American cinema is more commercially savvy, and so I'm already starting to see they are very cleverly starting to weave Chinese bits into their stories in order to do that. And I hope that with our co-production with British producers, we can really get a cultural meeting of minds to. Because I have a gut reaction. I mean, you loved the film Raise the Red Lantern. Every time I watch a Chinese film, particularly from the history of China, I'm completely, my nose is stuck to the screen. And I think as a nation, both nations, I think we're both nations of real, original storytellers. So I have this feeling that if we can get our producers to work together, I think we could create some really interesting things.
Well, I might just add to that 2 points. Fundamentally, like all communist countries, units and departments never connect laterally. They're all vertically independent. So the distribution department, which allows for whichever films to go into the cinema, together with the censorship, that's another one, is completely different from the co-production, and they don't really care. And what China also wants is to protect its own Chinese language film. And so, like a clever totalitarian state would always limit, and they always produce the argument that actually the most popular films are Chinese-made films, and they made a couple of, comedies, for example, based on that film where somebody wakes up in Las Vegas, not having missed the wedding, the similar sort of thing. Roses more than anybody else, but that's because that's the only thing people can watch. So it's not a real thing. But eventually they will. But it's very difficult, as you rightly pointed out, and Amanda notices, still heydays where they will just limit, and it's rather capricious what they let in. You're right, there's only about 10 or 20 films that they allow through into the cinema. Yeah, but one question here.
With the advent of British...
Use the mic, please.
Thanks. With the advent of British TV dramas and their success and popularity internationally, do you foresee the BFI kind of facilitating TV drama co-pros in the future? Is that beyond your remit?
No, it absolutely isn't. So we only invest in film production, not TV, because actually there's already something like £3 billion going because of the public sector broadcast. When it comes to the co-production treaty and the negotiation of it, we would have liked it to have been film and TV, and indeed the one with Brazil, it covers both of those, because you're right, they're getting closer and closer. And also it seems counterintuitive, because when you go to China, Sherlock Holmes, Downton Abbey, Benedict Cumberbatch, and you're away. So it's predominantly television. There are, I think, possibly the authorities wanted confidence in our approach and why we were doing it. And I know that there are discussions well on board now for it to be extended to television. The other thing is, right at the top, all of this is run by something called SAFT, which is the state agency, and television is separate to film. So it's 2 sets of people you have to work with.
Hello, Amanda, this is Xiao, and I actually met you several times at BFI and in Beijing as well. We are running a Chinese film festival called Film East in this country for 8 years, and we work very closely with BFI on every year's Chinese New Year exhibition. What I want to say is 2 things. One is a big thank you, because Electronic Shadows last year was brilliant. But I think more importantly is every year at BFI South Bank, such great venue, we always have Chinese New Year screening, which is a big thing, means a lot. And I can see more and more audience come for Chinese films every year. And next year we work with BFI again, and we brought a new film. It's already confirmed, so yeah, it's next February again at BFI South Bank. It's a great new film about a choreography master, so that's exciting news. The second thing is my real job actually is a filmmaker, and we just finished shooting a feature film in Birmingham last week. And it's in confidential now, so nobody knows, but it's a feature film.
You just told us.
But I won't tell you the title. The thing is, we try to make a co-production because of the treaty, everything. But it's a long wait. It's a lot of issues involved. So actually, now we made it a British film, but we have very, very strong Chinese culture elements and British culture elements. For example, we put all of the fish and chips and afternoon tea in it, shot in the brilliant castle. Yeah, it's an 18th century castle in Birmingham, we shot in it. And we got 3 named Chinese actors come to be the main leading roles. So it's a real marriage, but we don't have the marriage certificate. I mean, that is what's happening. And now we are moving to the post-production stage. So my question is, I know there are a lot of very good schemes for co-production, first-time feature film director, female film director.
I asked you for money.
Yeah,
Yes.
so is there any way, any real offer to film projects like us on post-production and promotion, marketing, all this? Because we are also learning, don't really know
Okay,
how to
one minute, otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Okay,
But
so-
can I just ask you this question?
Yeah.
In principle, if they came to you with a proposition of funding on the basis of what you've heard, is it a no-no, or we like to have a look at it?
We have public funds. Public funds are open to absolutely everybody, so whether you're Spielberg, who by the way we wouldn't fund, he's not British, but somebody of that equivalent, or whether you're an upcoming filmmaker direct in the UK, you all have to go to the website and it's really clear. All I would say to you is, because we're public funds, we have enough money to invest in about 20 to 25 projects a year, and we get about 500 applications. So it's very, very, very competitive, but you should have a go, have a look at the site. But just coming back to the co-production treaty, you're presumably talking about the cultural test, which would give you access to the British tax relief, which you would be eligible for as a co-production. It's a really, really easy and very quick, and it's run from the BFI, it's a fantastic unit. So if you catch me afterwards, I'll give you the emails, because I don't understand why you've had so much difficulty with it. You should be eligible.
Yes.
I've been involved in
Not so loud.
Yeah, not so loud, yeah. In the promotion, distribution and exhibition of Chinese films in London for the past maybe 5 or 6 years with our film festival and distribution label. What I'd like to find out is there a way we can get some help from the BFI or from this to kind of really reach a bigger audience? Because being a small independent body, we're not really reaching a core audience. I mean, there's a lot of Mandarin speakers in this country that we're not really getting to because they're not really coming via our social media pages, etc. So we're really looking for things like marketing budget or the ability to bring talent over from China.
Okay, so first of all, I think I would empathise, because one of the things that we were slightly disappointed with Electric Shadows is that we were hoping to capture a much bigger Chinese audience. We were really interested in reaching out to new audiences, and we didn't achieve that, so I know it's quite difficult. We do have a festivals fund. It's on the website. Have a look, have an apply. Bear in mind it's very competitive. I mean, I think the good sign is that it's obviously signed as Chinese, which you'll be really interested in. The bad thing is presumably you're based in London, and we're desperately trying to not spend all of our money in London, so I'm just being honest with you. Yeah. But have a look at the fund. It's there. It's on the website. But contact us anyway, because it'd be interesting to work together, if we find you or not.
Hello. We're very interested in different platforms for film, and quite rightly, when you started your talk, it was a working class, very low art form that was massively popular. And I'm interested in the pleasure garden art form theme parks. And recently we had Banksy's Dismal Land, which proved that you can have quite complex content and it's massively popular. I'm really interested in what's happening in China with regards to indigenous languages within film, but I'm not quite sure how to best make those links. Does the BFI have an interest in theme park or pleasure gardens as a platform? And if so, how can links be made to enable us to create those the right content that might necessarily go into sort of traditional theatrical release afterwards, but certainly content initially for a live engagement with the form?
The first thing is I happen to know, and David probably does as well, that there's new legislation in China where if you are doing big developments, and of course there are huge support to developments, that you have to pay back into the community. And I think there was a whole era when the promises were made but not delivered, so now you actually have to do it in advance. So there's a massive programme, bizarrely, of theme parks and cultural entities being rolled out by the big developers there. So it's probably worth either talking to David or even CBBC, the China-British business thing, because I think they could make those contacts. Is the BFI interested? We're always interested in any way where we can capture the hearts and minds of people with a greater diversity of film that they get normally.
So should we speak to you as well as CBC about that? And if so, which departments should I?
I think it depends what you, I think if you're looking to link into parks and places of entertainment in China, I talk to CBBC.
So it's more to do with the film, the content creation, linking with that talent, the nurturing of the actual artists that are making.
So you're interested in independent filmmakers in China? Sorry. I don't think we've really cracked that yet. I mean, for the festival, we get a lot of films sent in, so I don't quite know the answer to that, and I don't really know how much there is emerging yet.
Well, I can tell you that, you see, it's not as simple as that. You've got to understand China is watched. So it's not as if you can just go in and say, let me look up all the independent producers or directors and let's see what their work is. And let's see whether we can go to a park and discover a Chinese Banksy or make a film and put it on and distribute it. I'm afraid life is much more complicated than that in China. And there's Big Brother, there's censorship. You might consider something as being culturally and socially important, but the standards are extremely different. I mean, the other thing I want to say is this, is that whenever you have Chinese films, there's always a problem of language. Now, you might not realize this, but the most successful films in the history of the world are always in English. Now, of course, people say, well, we can have subtitles, but that actually, I can't. Can you name a couple of films with subtitles which are sort of world blockbusters?
No, but I think in terms of audience size, funnily enough, some of the Bollywood films.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah.
Hidden Dragon.
Crouching Tiger.
Yeah. That was probably a token nomination.
But there is interesting film coming out, and I think David's been much more eloquent. That's why I was struggling. You can't. It behaves completely differently. But what you could do is, I would just watch all the film festivals. I mean, even for example, quite well-known filmmakers like Peter Chen. He made a film called Darling, which was different to his normal films, which we obviously offered a berth here at the London Film Festival. So he is bound to know and have behind him satellites of young filmmakers. So we can probably get him through that way.
We spoke to the young filmmaker who was at the Chinese English Film Conference, who had created a film Goodbye, Mr. Tumor.
Oh no, we screened it. Yes, that's right.
And again, excellent. He was really excited
Not
by
that young, and it's been one of the biggest box office successes in China.
Yes. And we were interested for that reason as well, because it's reaching a mass popular audience, but it's also, to some degree, potentially art house in his approach and his use of genre to engage with the audience. And he was very excited about the
Look, the
potential.
massive successes of anything in China depends on distribution, like everything else. You don't have distribution, you don't have it. And when you have distribution, people are very limited in what they can see, watch. So I always take a bit skeptical about commercial successes in China, because the starting point is that you're already incredibly filtered. And that's the problem.
The other thing is
You have to be incredibly lucky to get off to, distribution system.
and also, I know you know this, but we learn all the time. So we did, we worked with UKTI, and we did this partnership with Le TV in China, because we want Chinese audiences to start looking at British films as well. And obviously all of the films so we did this deal, we put some classic British films up onto Le TV, and obviously it had to go all through the censorship, and even working out, because the censors can alter from department to department as well, which digitally is a good old challenge. We put this up, and we got 30 million downloads, and so this was like gobsmacking for us.
What sort of film?
The King's Speech. The King's Speech. Well, fortunately, we didn't see any money from this, but it was a cultural thing. But then the Chinese said to us, "Oh, 30 million, don't mention it. It's very small." So, there's a quantum which for us would be extraordinary, and given this, we forget.
I just think that if it is a Western film, a Chinese audience would immediately want to watch it. That is the privation of Western films that everybody wants to see. Right. Another question? Yes. 1 minute. Another question?
Of dubbing or subtitles, how many languages are there in China? It's not just Mandarin and Cantonese.
No, only one.
Hundreds.
Mandarin.
Only one?
Yes.
There are a whole lot of other dialects.
They're dialects, but they're not used. Now, Sichuan changed all that. One language, one script.
Plus Cantonese.
No, Cantonese does not exist. It does in Canton, but in Hong Kong it doesn't exist. Nobody speaks any other language than Mandarin. I'm
Yeah,
afraid.
you can say virtual
Yes. Yes.
And my question is, what kind of Chinese
Use the microphone. Sorry. You've got to shuffle it. Hello.
And in the history and the China scene movie, The Last Emperor, I think that's a milestone of China and foreign directors' co-production. And for the last decades, I think we don't have the same kind of film can be equal to that. And I talked with some Chinese producers, and they are very interested about the story of China's old Summer Palace. I'm not sure. Is that kind of China's history story would be accepted by UK audience?
Yes.
But you've got to understand the context of that production with Bertolucci in 1983, I think. Because I was living in Beijing at the time, and I went on set many times and had barbecues with Bertolucci whilst he was filming it. It was the rise of a new era. It was at the tail end of the Cultural Revolution of '76. The 80s were the first time when there seems to be a release of tension. And so a lot of people were a bit more accommodating. You're absolutely right. After that, it's all downhill. So that was an exceptional case. And you would never get permission now to go film in Forbidden City anymore.